560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. All right, before we move on, we've got to correct the record. We should know better than to be so loosey-goosey with people's alma maters. High school, very important in Chicagoland. You can't get high school facts wrong. And Amy, you made an egregious error, and I made a minor one.
Well, okay, what did I do?
Your egregious error?
Not mentioning Hersey High School?
No.
Where I went to school?
Merrick Garland, not a New Trier grad. He went to Niles West.
Oh. Ooh, that's...
Yeah.
Should I just resign now?
No, we'll let you stay on. But my
what's your mistake, Dan?
Minor error as compared to egregious error.
Uh-huh.
Chris O'Donnell, the actor, went to Loyola, not New Trier. Born in Winnetka, raised in Lake Forest, went to Loyola.
I think we should work on each other's resignation letters. Yes.
Yeah, maybe. Something
over.
else.
We had a good run.
Something else where I gave short shrift. This was a slightly more than minor error. Short shrift. I dismissed the other two Final Four teams for the state championship.
Oh, yes. And?
Bennett, which, by the way, only one loss. The only loss Bennett has, they're 34-1, only lost to Simeon.
Oh.
Who's also in the finals playing St. Ignatius 3A.
Ooh, okay.
I put money on Simeon if you engage in games of chance like that. But anyway, it's Bennett versus New Trier. The other two teams don't matter. Of course they all matter. Everyone matters, Amy.
Uh-huh. And what
Every
are the
high
other
school
two
team
teams?
matters. And we wish them all the best. Mary Queen of Victory, pray for them all. Downers Grove North versus Moline in the other semifinal.
Oh.
So
I wonder if Sean Kasten's going to be there.
I'm kind of thinking that whoever wins the Bennett New Trier game is the state champion at that class level. And that's the other thing, thinking about, not to go too far down the rabbit hole thinking about high school basketball, but back in the day we were talking to Joe Dondonville about his film Game Changers and the New Trier versus Marshall games in 65 and 66. You know, there was just a state champion. There weren't all these divisions based on school size. So it's just such a different time now because there'll be obviously I don't even know. I can't even keep track of how many classes there are in basketball. It's different than in football. 6, 8.
In football, there's 8.
Yeah, I think basketball maybe there's 6. Anyway, all
I
right.
know
So
we're 3A, but we didn't make it to the finals.
We've corrected the record on all things.
And you're going to win because Catholic teams are always taller than public schools. I don't know what it is.
Although it's sometimes in basketball, it's a little bit different. I mean, one of the great teams. I mean, here we go again. We're going to do an hour on high school basketball. One of the great teams of all time. Illinois, one of the greatest, but arguably, although I still might put Michael Finley and Donnie Boyce's Proviso East team ahead of them, but one of the great teams in Illinois high school basketball history
is the 1984-85 Hersey Huskies.
No.
Yes, it was the best team we've ever had in basketball.
Well, you ever had. I'm talking about for the entire state, not your...
Well, we went downstate.
Yeah, good for you. It's real nice. Pat on the
head.
So
rude.
Glenbard West, the Glenbard West team that won the state title last year. That was one of the great teams, and that's a public school, obviously.
Yeah,
Proviso East, one of the great teams. Boyce and Sherelle Ford and obviously Michael Finley. That's a public school team, so.
Yeah, and they played LeBron James's son's team. Remember well,
that was the one loss Glenbard West had last year. Was when the All Stars from California came in.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Why can't I think of
all
the
right. Yeah, we've corrected enough of the record on AHSA
but
here.
Now they're going to start a high school shot clock.
I don't
of that game, but we're getting in the weeds. All right.
I also can't stand to hear any more Hersey stories. What? So we have to move on. All right. So yesterday, our friend Greg Bishop over at the Illinois Radio Network in Center Square posed this question. Pritzker, one that we had raised during the election about his substantial donations to two Supreme Court justice candidates who are now Supreme Court justices at the state level, of course, and how those two Supreme Court justices, Rochford and Mary Kay O'Brien, can rule on the constitutionality of the Safety Act given their political support from Pritzker. Here's what he said.
Explain the $1 million that you gave to each Supreme Court justices And should they recuse themselves in two important cases coming up, Safety Act, no cash bail, and also the gun ban?
I am sure this is something that the right wing is trying to stir up. I know you've written about it. The fact of the matter is I supported candidates who are running all across the board. If you're suggesting that the fact that I gave money to, let's say, the Democratic Party or to the committees that supported candidates means that everybody who received any money has to recuse themselves from anything to do with the state of Illinois, that's ridiculous. And I've certainly never asked anybody to vote a certain way or decide on a case a certain way. I would never do that. I never have. I never will. And these are independent judges, and they didn't go around and campaign on things, that they thought would win my support for them. I believe in them. I supported them like lots of other people did.
Yeah, of course.
Press conference over.
Yeah, heavens, no one would assert that there could be any potential or even appearance of a conflict of interest. No, of course not.
You don't bite off the hand that feeds.
Sean Kennedy is policy director at the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. He's a fellow at the Maryland Public Policy Institute as well. They've filed a amicus brief supporting Jim Glasgow and Jim Rowe and the challenge to the Safety Act, the constitutional challenge to the Safety Act that's before the Illinois Supreme Court. Oral arguments next week, expected decision on the constitutionality by month's end, and then we'll know whether Illinois is going to descend further into lawlessness or not. It's good to know that before Easter. Sean Kennedy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy.
Did you heard the governor's response there? He gave $1 million to each of the Supreme Court justices that won their elections back in November. But, of course, there's no reason they should recuse themselves because he just supports candidates because of who they are, and there's no reason to believe there's even an appearance of impropriety here.
It's concerning that the governor thinks that his personal and family wealth is acceptable for him to directly, obviously, interfere. I mean, obviously, everyone has the right to donate, but he is the governor. He's not just a rich guy who wants to influence the thing. He's the one who signed these bills. He's the one who has political allies here. So, I mean, the perception, even if wrong, that he's buying seats on the Illinois Supreme Court to justify his agenda is a worry, at least in the sense of faith in government, if anything else. Even if it's substantively, there's no problem. Well, it does erode trust.
May I file an amicus brief to your answer?
Sure.
So here's what I would say, too, in addition to that, to distinguish, because he does the whole, everybody I give money to, legislative candidates, Supreme Court justice candidates, they're all bought and paid for. No, they're independent, and they all have to recuse themselves from. No. He should know this as a lawyer. There's a different ethical standard when you're an officer of the court. There are legal canons that attach to judicial candidates that are not attached to legislative candidates or state level or other state level actors or local candidates. And particularly for state Supreme Court justice, those are going to be should be even more tightly adhered to. There's a difference, and there's a difference in the way judicial candidates are allowed to run in Illinois and a lot of other places too, in terms of the kind of rhetoric they can use, the kind of positions they can take, the kind of branding and material they can use. So there's a very different standard when it comes to, say, a candidate for Supreme Court justice than there is for a candidate for legislative office, and he tried to blur those lines purposely, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's treating them like they're any other politician, like he's buying an alderman seat, when in fact, obviously, this is somebody whose job is both as an officer of the court and the highest court in the state of Illinois to uphold the law first and foremost and not necessarily bend to any political whim. And that's definitely a concern. And that's where we are right now, I think, in Illinois, is that they're, with the Safety Act and obviously the general order from Cook County Chief Justice Timothy Evans, we're at a tipping point in terms of bail. We obviously have seen a number of horrific incidences in Chicago related to the bail reforms there, and we're obviously seeing the chaos in New York that just goes on day after day, where bailees are getting no bailees, I should say, people who didn't have to post anything or posted such a ludicrous amount of money that they're getting out and going on to commit horrific crimes, and there are no consequences, and there are no means by which to check them back. And we're seeing the results of that. I mean, there was a little girl, obviously, famously last year shot and killed by one of these individuals who was on a no bail order under the Cook County thing, and now they want to bring that to every county in Illinois. They want to bring that chaos everywhere. It's like everybody should feel the pain. And at what point do people stand up and say enough is enough? And one of the things that's so interesting that I think people are missing is when they look at some of the bail data, and Timothy Evans and a number of these studies have come out, is you sort of alluded to it, and it's obviously in the news about the state's attorney, Kim Foxx, is because she's pressing so many fewer charges, there are people who are never even coming up in front of judges in Cook County for bail. Their charges are being dropped or they're not being pursued, and as a result of that, they are being released before that. So we don't even know if these people were being charged under a sane state's attorney's office. What would have occurred if they were released, because they're going on to commit crimes, but they're outside of the bail system altogether because they were arrested but never processed and so forth. And obviously you're demoralizing Chicago PD, so they're not even making arrests where they should because there's no purpose. So we're in a sort of a conundrum here where Cook County is the largest jurisdiction in the state, and it's already chaotic. And bringing that to the rest of the state, to so many people in Chicago, is ho-hum. Why do I care what happens in McHenry County or what happens in Springfield or anywhere else? It's already happening in my hometown, so, let them suck an egg. And that's basically what the Illinois Supreme Court has to decide is, does the rest of Illinois get to meet Chicago's fate?
Well, what does your gut tell you? How is the Illinois Supreme Court going to side, with Pritzker or against the bail reform law?
My gut is that there has been a moment, a tipping point, and I can't get inside J.B. Pritzker's head, but nationally among Democrats, this D.C. crime bill, and obviously I live in the Washington, D.C. area, is evidence of this, that people are getting religion. I mean, even Lori Lightfoot, who obviously was run out of town last week, was sort of getting religion and was taking it to Kim Foxx and doing that. Was she doing enough? Obviously not. And now the front runner, Paul Vallas, is tough on crime and is seeking to sort of turn around some of the problems there. That's not going to fix the Kim Foxx situation, but there is a movement among rank-and-file Democrats that enough is enough. And the line I always use is there's a famous quote about a conservative intellectual named Irving Kristol, and he says, a neoconservative is just a liberal who's been mugged by reality. A tough-on-crime Democrat is just a liberal who's been mugged. And we're starting to see that. We had a Chicago alderman who was carjacked 2 years ago, and then suddenly that alderman gets religion on crime. And once this starts becoming real to these people in their own communities, then they turn. So has that happened to these Illinois Supreme Court justices? I don't know, but I think there is a gut instinct that they've gone too far this time, and I'm hopeful or cautiously optimistic that the Illinois Supreme Court, on legal grounds, because there is a very strong jurisprudence case, that they reject this. On a public policy matter, the case is clear. No bail is going to be a disaster. Take Cook County and make it worse because it's actually more extreme than Tim Evans' order. There still is cash bail to some extent in Cook County, and make what is going on in New York even worse because automatic and mandatory release will apply to even more people, even more violent and dangerous offenders. And the chaos that's going to ensue, I think they recognize. Whether or not they stand up and show themselves to be profiles in courage is yet to be seen, but I'm hopeful.
Well, it's your commentary is a sad one, but not an inaccurate one. You take note of saying this is they're looking at the justices through a political prism and not a legal one, because on the legal merits, this is a slam dunk. It is unconstitutional. It's black letter. The single subject argument alone without getting into the nuances of it. But it is clearly an unconstitutional law the way it was written. But in terms of their decision making, they're processing the political environment. They're processing what Pritzker actually wants. Because I think actually the irony is the governor wants this thing overturned because he wants to be rid of it as something that nags at him, particularly with his presidential aspirations. But you're right to lead with the political analysis, because that's how even our Supreme Court justices in Illinois process everything, despite the oath they take to interpret based on the law and based on the state and federal constitution. It's a sad commentary, but as I said, an accurate one. Sean Kennedy's policy director at the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, fellow at the Maryland Public Policy Institute as well. Sean, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Old Man Winter is here, and you'll need a heating and cooling company you know you can depend on. Look no further. That company is the original Arlington Heights Heating and Cooling. They're not one of those massive impersonal companies with inexperienced technicians and subcontractors. Arlington Heights Heating and Cooling sends only their own highly